Good morning, everybody. It's thrilling to have all of you here today, and this is such an exciting topic. Um, the what Center for Corporate Learning really struggles to do is help organizations learn at the pace of change. We try to give you fresh content, even if it's leadership development. We have new approaches, etc. So when I realized from another friend at LS3P that we had an architect that looks hard at hybrid work hubs, knowing what I knew about Karen and Caroline, it just all came together, and in like a week it came together. And we'll be very afraid because you're soon to be a friend of the center.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, good. So after this, after the presentation, if you have further interest in imagining how your organization can react to the changes that we're going to discuss, please reach out to me or Jessica Moss. But if you reach out to me, I will certainly get with Jessica and we will talk to you about it and see if our team can help in any way. Given that it's a very busy time, we understand it doesn't always work out, but I'm throwing it out there in case anybody is interested. So now I'm going to let the team go ahead. Okay, I guess we'll kick it off and give us your little background, and then Karen, when you kick off, do yours, and then Caroline. So we'll take it over.
All right. Thank you, Nan. Thank you, everyone. Excuse me. I truly appreciate this opportunity. As Nan said, I'm kind of the newbie to the group. And so that means I drew the short straw and I get to go first today. And to be honest, between Caroline and Karen and myself, there's a lot of overlap when we start to talk about reimagining the workplace. So I'm going to talk a little more broad about some things and then talk about physical environments, and then we'll transition to my esteemed colleagues. But I am Will Drennan with LS3P. I have been with the firm for 16 years now, but I actually started my career in Anderson, South Carolina for a small firm there. So I've actually been in the industry for 20 years now. My career at LS3P has been focused on interior design and interior architecture. And I actually lead the studio for interior design in our Charlotte office. And I am what we call our image knowledge team chairman. We have several knowledge teams in the firm, and they're devoted to different sectors or practices or studies. The image knowledge team is devoted to interiors practice across our 8 offices. We are very excited to be able to bring all of the varied experiences that we practice in the different sectors and talk about things together. And it's a really unique forum to our firm, and we enjoy it. My last 16 years has also been devoted to the workplace. That has been the majority of the work that I've done with LS3P, and I love it. It is a passion of mine. So I'm really excited to be able to share this reimagining with you guys this morning. So as we roll into this, we want to talk about normal because there's a lot of people like, what the heck is normal now, right? And we like to say that we can do better than normal. That's kind of a consistent thing in the industry, but how can we design for better? And then I want to take a moment to talk about whether hybrid environments, and we'll talk about what they are in a moment, whether they're right for you or not. So with that, Sally, thank you. There's not a real less than awkward way to do slide transitions. So everybody bear with us. We're going to do our best today. So everybody was familiar with what happened pre-pandemic. We came to the office and we worked. We like to inject a little humor here. So you might recognize The Office, the TV show here on the left. But, that was, hopefully our offices looked a little better than Dunder Mifflin, but, we do what we can. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic hit and we juggled. We faced, as a as a society, really unique challenges. But in the workplace, teams came together, leaders came together. We showed, in most cases, extreme empathy, agility, and adaptability. And out of necessity, we transformed our workplaces from a standard practice and into kind of a mode of constant transformation. We were constantly adapting to new technologies or new ideas. And for many of you, you probably went home. And so you felt like probably the image on the right here. You've gained probably some either small human coworkers or furry coworkers. You set up anywhere you could, you made the best of it. And what we're finding is now that we're returning to what people would consider normal, the return to office, um, you know, we don't want to give up some of that we gained in the pandemic. Um, to be honest, we want to come back next, please, to an environment that is more extraordinary than the one we left, right? An environment that starts to build on what we had prior to the pandemic and what we have after the pandemic, the lessons that we've learned and mesh them into both. To be honest, across the industry, from furniture to design to protocols to the digital environment, we've actually been designing for better for years now. But we all recognize the fact that better is often slow and steady. Let's be honest, culturally, most of us, most of our organizations are very methodical, and we want to take the time to vet and think through things. Oftentimes we use that as a crutch and an excuse. Prior to the pandemic, Fujitsu had done a survey of employees, and this was not with the pandemic in mind. And they talked about, thank you, Sally. They talked about, where do you get the most productive work done? What is your best and most productive work environment? And 74% of the respondents said, hey, the office is the best place. So Fujitsu asked the same question after the pandemic, and now 15% said the office is the best place. 30% said, hey, working at home is a lot better. But the overwhelming majority, 55%, said that they felt a mix between the home and office was really the best solution. And in company surveys that are coming out from all over the place, like this one you see on screen here, what we're finding is that it's this hybrid environment, this mix of home and office. And not only saying that I'm going to work in one or the other, but blending the two together in both places to make it the most efficient place for your employees. As you see here, this chart is really talking about, all right, home is great. What's it great for? Well, it's great for concentration. It's great for sharing and mentoring people. What is home not good for? Hey, if I need to brainstorm or scrum with someone, or I need to socialize, oh my gosh, that doesn't happen at home. And we can only socialize so much with the toddlers and things and the fur babies that are running around, right? So this is, so what is the issue here? The issue is we need an environment that is better. So as we move forward, recognizing those constraints at home, we ask ourselves the question, how do we design for better? Well, first, we have to admit that our workplaces need some enhancement to support new initiatives and technologies. We can create new models of workplace strategies and incorporate what we knew prior to the pandemic and what we learned during the process. The good news is many of these things already exist. And in this chart here, this is kind of fun. I love it. We understand where you have to, if you want to be in the same time and same place, this is where you are. And if you want to be in a different place at a different time, this is how these are the tools you're using. It's a really clear infographic. There shouldn't be anything on this table that people don't already have or use within the organization. So how we get there is not even the challenge, it's the why. So for us, when we look at why, and this is part of my exploration this morning, is to have everyone think outside the box, right? Think broad. We start to look at why. And for us, we like to look at the fundamental human needs. And these are specific to human needs in the workplace. Why is important because we start to get at new models. We start to ask ourselves, going to a hybrid environment is different, but why? Well, it's simply put, we need to start looking at our workplaces as with human concerns in mind and not just our institutional concerns. So it's really bringing humanity back to the workplace. So we actually work with a lot of different companies. In this case, Natalie Cockrell, who is a workplace strategist at Herman Miller, lended us some of this information. So I want to give a shout out there. But when we look at the fundamental human needs, we look at achievement of individuals. We as humans want to take pride in our accomplishments and want to be recognized for them, which leads us to status, is the recognition of not only achievement, but just the contributions that we make to our organizations. We look at security, and it's not just physical security, even though that is, an imperative, but we look at the security of our health, our security that comes with familiarity, and the competence of leadership within any of our organizations. We look at autonomy. We are funny as human beings. We like to be left alone, but we don't want to be alone, right? So we like to be able to be given a task and then the opportunity to go and prove to ourselves and others that we know what we're doing. We want to work for organizations that exude purpose, organizations that want to make a meaningful difference. And once again, back to our social nature as humans, we want to belong. We want to have meaningful connections to one another. So we're going to take a moment and break these down just a hair. We're going to do it in pairs, so it's not so much. And I'm going to admit I broke the first cardinal rule of any great presentation: no bullet points. But in this case, it kind of helps with the conversation. So obviously, when we start to explore the why, it's got to be there's got to be benefit to the why. So in this case, as we look at purpose and autonomy, we see that the benefits come in understanding these human needs and adjusting to them, that we can align to our people. We can allow for them to transform collaboration, which advances innovation and ultimately improves performance within our organizations. And that engagement advances the purpose of our organizations in and of itself. We then ask ourselves the question, how can leadership support these efforts, these human needs? Well, we can establish purpose and we can design for autonomy. So clear and concise direction, and then the ability for someone to go off and do the work without micromanagement. We can create intentional and authentic communication. Now, I want to put a plug in here real quick, because communication you're going to see pops up a lot. The difference in the communication that we've been used to and the communication we're talking about is in this term authentic, right? As we move forward, future generations that are coming to the workplace are seeking communication that's not your typical run-of-the-mill corporate newsletter. They want to hear from you. They want to feel what you're saying, and they want to know that you're speaking with passion and authority and with empathy in mind as well. We also see leaders can support purpose and autonomy through continual learning and adopting a strategic mindset and purpose-driven leadership, really being a working manager, if you will. And ultimately, leaders can let your people free, let them be free to explore and innovate and come back to you with suggestions on how things can be done and hopefully done better. Moving forward, let's look at status and achievement. The benefits to understanding these fundamental human needs is to tie the individual's contributions to the purpose of the organization. I mean, ultimately, we've been doing this for years. Let's just make it a much more strong part of what we do day to day. And this increases motivation and creativity of your people. You want to talk about attracting and then retaining folks. It's definitely allowing them to make achievements and feel that they're appreciated. So support this through routine storytelling, those pats on the back and letting people know when there are successes. There's also the idea that you talk about lessons learned. Don't hide things that don't work. Talk about them. Let everyone learn from them. Once again, maintain your connections and communication with your employees and grow through learning and training. Learning and training can be incredibly good tools moving forward, because they can actually be methods by which you bring people back to the office. And it's not just to do work, but it's to communicate with one another, to socially interact with one another, and then to learn. So it's, win-win-win. And you want to let people, you want to give them the tools that set them up for success. And then the last pair we'll talk about are safety, or security, and belonging. So the benefits to this pair of human needs is that you can actually advance innovation. When people feel safe and secure in their job and in the organization and how it's running, and they feel like they belong, they will do their best. They will be your most powerful advocate and advanced innovation because they will embody an entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm so proud I could say that word half right this morning. So thank you. Um, we also see that in a safe environment that's focused on belonging, we can unlock the potential of diversity and inclusion among employees. And this all leads to an advance in the well-being of the individual and the organizational culture because you're listening to one another. And as leaders, we can support this through looking at different perspectives and seeking input from different sources. We can demonstrate personal growth mindsets and curiosity. Once again, that spirit of entrepreneurship. Um, Once again, communication, offering that open dialogue, being, forthright and speaking to everybody, and making it about, in some cases, a daily touch point. We can also prioritize well-being by adapting for personal needs and preferences. This is an opportunity for your organization to realize that there may not be a one-size-fits-all solution for all of your employees, and adapting. And that gives, each employee the knowledge that you think that you're thinking about them personally and not just in a group. And then you can continue to invest in the relationships. Once again, those daily touch points with employees, or um, you know more steady communication. One thing that's come to light is, I think it's the days of the yearly or the annual performance review are gone, where you're going to have to look at working together to talk about performance and purpose more regularly. So understanding um, these needs, we want to look at now, we talked about how and what and why. And so we're going to break down now, and I'm going to touch on the physical aspect of what a better workplace might look like. Some examples, if you will. And then I'm going to follow up with just talking about, is hybrid right for you? But before we get there, I just wanted to mention that we're not going to just stop at the physical attributes of the workplace, but my esteemed colleagues are going to jump in. Caroline's going to talk about digital processes, and then Karen's going to jump in, and I got that backwards. Sorry. Karen's first going to take over and talk about policy and practice procedures related to, the how and the what and the why, and then Caroline will jump in with the digital processes. From the physical perspective, we want to look at environments that, enhance social interaction, that become a destination. The office should be the thing that brings you out of your routine of focus work at home or in a third place, perhaps, and entice you to come in. It should be really exciting. No one's really excited to come in and sit at a desk for 8 or 9 hours a day, right? So we want to start to create environments like you see here in the upper left, bold and vibrant, perhaps if it ties to your brand, but about socialization. This is the main lobby for CompuCom, an environment where the brand starts at the front door, very subtle cues, but it's all about soft furnishings, plush carpeting. They can use this, it's kind of like the watering hole, if you will, but they can also use this for town hall. So it serves dual purpose, and it's very friendly and inviting. And then you can move to places that are destinations with your organization, such as a game room, which you might see like in the middle upper row. And not just a video game hidden around the corner somewhere. We also see the need for the mesh of virtual and physical spaces. So moving forward, I think a lot of us have to recognize that meeting spaces shouldn't look like meeting spaces anymore. They should really look like war rooms, project rooms, team rooms, huddles, whatever you want to call them. In this example on the upper right, you'll see that, this is a work table. And so people could be in the office working together in a group, and their colleagues are working. It's more of a live stream. Don't think video teleconference, think live stream, so that your employees are tied together virtually and physically. And in the bottom row, we also feel messaging is very important, but it doesn't have to be your flat 2D messaging. It can be digital, or in this case, this is chalkboard paint. And so you can change facts. It's one of those other things that can entice people into the office to see what's going on and see new initiatives that are forming, and allow people to leave messages. It makes the workplace more personal. And then spaces that encourage gathering and celebration, obviously, like in the last two images you see here. This space that we lovingly refer to as a steratorium in the middle of the bottom row, it's great. Let's face it, we never really leave high school, right? So this is like hanging out on the bleachers in the gym or at the football field. But it's also great for town halls. And hey, guess what? It solves a real issue, we got to go from the first floor to the second floor, and we don't want everyone to take the elevator, right? So you want to talk about well-being in the workplace, we can subtly encourage people to move those legs. And then in the bottom right, spaces that these are all individual rooms that can be opened up. So when you have those moments for town halls or celebration, or just want to open up the flow and let people move about, these spaces that really are unique and come together, which ultimately is part of the mission. This next set of images that I want to share with you are ways that we look at specific spaces for leadership and spaces that support leadership's goals in this kind of better than normal environment we're moving into with hybrid, thinking. And these aren't new. Most of you have probably already moved to a lot of these, but we want to see leadership spaces that are accessible and social. And it's a mix of assigned and unassigned. They need to be transparent, and they need to be about coaching. So you'll see in the upper left image, it's basically an executive bullpen. So in this example, this is once again CompuCom. All of their executives sit in this bullpen. Thank you, Sally. And they have breakout rooms to the perimeter that they can easily go take a meeting in or take a personal call. You'll also see that the number of private offices is shrinking. So in the pictures to the right, for instance, and in the center, you'll see that private offices may become less about assigned private offices and more about shared spaces. So they can be used by others. But if you need a private office for a conversation, you can easily book that space. And now we're even talking about not booking spaces for a day or two when you're traveling or in the office, but booking it by the hour, so that you as a leader aren't just behind a door all day, that you can be out and about, you can sit and socialize, because as leaders, we lead by example. And in the bottom right, you'll see an image. I know it's a little tough to see, but in that example, when we talk about coaching and mentoring, this is really set up as more or less a conference space that leadership could inhabit, but it's very comfortable and casual. And even to the bottom left, you'll see leader offices right outside of the gaming spaces. So creating those environments that start to blend leadership, into the population, because in most cases, we as employees won't engage in a space or activity within an office unless we see leadership doing it as well. So everybody, I know that's like drinking through a fire hose, so I appreciate you hanging on. We then need to ask ourselves, if hybrid's right for you. So this is, I think, important to say, hybrid's not right for everyone. Hybrid is not necessarily the right environment for every element of your organization, right? You probably have some departments or groups that this won't work for. So to help you get at that, what we do is we want to look at your organizational culture. This framework here is very interesting, um, in that we're looking at, um, sorry, my mind stopped, a framework for you to kind of study who you are and what your cultural type is. So I'm going to go through these real fast to talk about some of the information that we're gleaning as we come out of the pandemic. But in most organizations, you're either a collaborate culture or you have collaborate cultures within. These are organizations that are focused on long-term development. They're the groups that say, hey, we do things together. They're very open and friendly organizations, and very sharing, very relationship oriented. As we move forward, we're seeing that 60%, 60% of their time is preferred to be in the office. Once again, they're social and need to be together. But they can also spend 40% of their time at home or in other locations when focus work is required. So as we move forward and think about this physically, we're going to see that we require group spaces and social spaces within the office, but also spaces so that people could break away and accomplish specific tasks. So not necessarily throwing out all of your workstations, but maybe consolidating and shrinking.
Hey, Will,
Yes.
Matt asked, with less offices, are you seeing the use of phone booths becoming more prevalent? Our colleagues in Europe have tons of them.
Yes. So we're seeing smaller spaces, more right-sized spaces across the board, be it conference or meeting spaces, private offices, and yes, the phone booths, depending on, I think, the shift you make in your physical environment. If you're creating very social spaces and you're gearing your organization, towards those more communal gathering spaces, and you're expecting focused work to happen offsite, you don't necessarily need more phone booths or smaller spaces. Some would be helpful, but it's not like a one-to-one ratio you're trying to create for employees, right? Because the idea is I'm going to go elsewhere. If your organization's kind of a mix where you're going to have a lot of social space, but then you're going to have some, like in the collaborate culture type here, where you might have still spaces for, tasks. I meet as a group, but then I have to go focus, but I need to come back to the group. I think those are environments that would benefit from phone booths. So hopefully I helped answer that question. Matt. All right, you're welcome. In create cultures, these are the we do things first folks, right? They're about breakthroughs. They are constantly innovating and adapting. Really, for this group, they need about 80% of their time in the office, right? They feed off of one another's energy. They're the extroverts. They need that that cross-pollination to get things done. So this is going to require, dedicated team spaces and agile spaces that they can easily adapt and change to support their needs. In a control culture, it's the culture of we do things right. They're very structured teams. They follow very formal internal processes, and they basically manage risk. This one's interesting as well, because they feel like 80% of their time should be spent in the office. This is about knowledge sharing, and 20% of their time could be spent at home, but they don't really look at other places as a viable option because of, sensitivity of information. It's a security issue. So for these cultures, we still see spaces for project development and formal meeting, but then a lot of individual workspaces that all support the sharing of information. And the final one here is the compete culture. It's the we do things fast culture. It's all about short-term performance. It's results driven. And these organizations, or components of an organization, are about their reputation and their effectiveness, right? I think realtors when I think the compete culture, to be honest with you. The majority of their time actually should be out of the office. They're either with clients or on the road doing something else. So they really get the majority of their work, 50% of it done in other spaces or third locations. But then they need 30% of their time in the office, and then they can do about 20% of the time at home. So in the office, they're looking to come in and to have access to shared tools, but also for spaces that will help support strategic thinking and informal connections. So in summary, I think the important thing to say here is that if we can support these fundamental human needs, recognizing that, our organizations can become more human-centric moving forward, by recognizing our cultural types and then adapting our physical space, we can give our employees choice, which is ultimately what most of them are saying coming out of the pandemic. But these environments can also provide more inclusivity and equability in the work experience. And ultimately, these types of environments and experiences and practices are known to encourage higher levels of employee engagement, satisfaction, and empowerment. It's not necessarily getting to work remotely from Tahiti, but it's the next best thing.
Well, Will, I would like to work remotely from Tahiti. So let's see if you can get that taken care of as well.
Do my best, Karen.
Thanks for sharing. My name is Karen Dudley Cobreth. I am a global HR consultant, and I represent my organization, which is HR Concierge Consulting. I am an HR transformation specialist, and my specialty is going into workplaces and helping them to assess their people, their processes, and how to use technology to improve, to ensure that they're aligning their people and their business strategies. So I'm excited to be a partner with the center and being here with you today. When I think of a workplace, I'm thinking of a collaborative group of individuals effectively using technology to achieve a business goal. And so, unlike Will, I'm not necessarily looking at a specific location for that to happen. However, we do realize that organizations do have to have physical spaces for employees because all work is not able to be remote. But here recently, with the pandemic, we have looked at various work models that have changed what we had done, and frankly, in our lifetime. And so when we're looking at the working models, we're looking at things in an unprecedented way that will allow our companies to shift while maintaining their competitiveness in the marketplace. And so understanding that centralized is something that we've previously hit, decentralized we've hit. And with the beginning of the pandemic, we started to do the hybrid remote type of work locations and the work ability. But now, after the pandemic, and with people still fearing coming into a physical workspace, a lot of organizations are taking the opportunity to explore full remote working. So, with either of those, the communication is going to be key. Having that interaction with those employees are what makes this a great opportunity for any company. So, when we're talking a few facts about remote working, as listed on the slides, 25 to 30% of workforces are looking to be remote by the end of this year, according to Gartner. That is a high number of people making change. We went into the pandemic and we made this change very quickly out of an emergent need. However, it should be very methodical about how we then transition at the end of this year as we are coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, and now really being strategic about how we're looking at our jobs and our individuals who are performing those roles. Also, 73% of teams alone will be remote workers. So, how do you effectively continue to allow those teams to gain synergy, to have the out of the box thinking and innovation that's required of teams, and still be effective when they're not physically in the same space? As we'll share, there's great models of being able to come together. But what about those times when they're geographically dispersed, where they can't all be physically in one area? How will employers take that information and truly analyze what type of work needs to be done remotely and what type of work, frankly, cannot be? When we have 74% of our companies plan to shift not only the temporarily remote work, but also now making it permanent, that's a good segment of people that are not ever really planning to return to a physical building. What are we looking at as it relates to what are the benefits that we're now offering to attract that remote worker? Some things could be as simple as you're giving some level of a stipend on a monthly basis for cell phone usage. It could be for internet usage and things of that nature. So you have to be creative around what type of remote work you're offering and then what benefits you're going to provide to that remote worker. And with 74% of the companies plan to shift there permanently, it's really good time to get started. In addition to that, with 25% of the employees saying they're willing to take a pay cut to work remotely, it's important to know exactly what your employees are looking for. If a 10% pay cut will allow someone to stay home, what does that look like for your benefits plan? And also your compensation structure. Is there a need to change your compensation structure to allow a different um, incentive plan for someone who works remote versus someone who works in the office? All of that needs to be looked at. But understanding every industry is not a work from home industry. Every position is not a work from home position, and every individual is not suited to work from home. And so this is where it's important that you collaborate with your employees early on. If you can advance the slide, Sally. Thank you. In order for this change to be effective, we have to engage our employees at the onset, understanding that there's going to be some bumps in the road, but sharing with your employees that you're going to go through this in partnership with them. That is not a top-down management only type of a decision as to which positions are remote versus those that are hybrid versus those that are in office. But you're actually giving options to the employees with the information, and you really are sharing that it's an experiment because this is an unprecedented territory for most companies. And so when you're sharing the insights and letting them know, hey, we're looking to see what's best for the business and for our employees. And here are the options that we're thinking about. But what options are out there for you? Or out of all the options that are available, which are best for you? You then have some data that's you're able to action off that data. And then you have the opportunity to put it into an experiment controlled setting, understanding that you may put it out for a pilot for one particular team to see if it works and see how effective it is. Getting some data to now say, hey, if we look at this particular type of a position, these are the elements of the position that can be done remotely. Here are some that can't be. So then you're looking at the structure of the team. Is there a need for some portion of the team to be remote where the other portion may need to be in office? And then what do you do from a compensation structure when there is a difference? And if by chance you do all of that and it doesn't fit your culture, then you've already shared with your employees, this is an opportunity for us to look at something that is allowing us to do it differently, but we haven't settled on the final, but we know what portion works and what portion doesn't. Employees will appreciate that transparency, and that transparency is what will drive that collaboration and a better employee experience overall. And so as you're looking at where you are in your current state, here are some considerations you really must make as an employer of people, and understanding all does not work for everyone. So your job descriptions, look at each one of your job descriptions, pull out the tasks that can be done in an office setting versus those that cannot. Same thing for remote settings. And once you identify those, look and see, is that job still designed correctly to be an in-office job only? You may have to get creative. There are those hybrid models that maybe they have some in-office responsibilities that only require once a week. It may only require twice a month. But the creativity and the innovation around that, along with the support that you're providing to that employee in that position, will make that position a value add for your organization. As it relates to benefits, one of the most attractive benefits right now for any employer is the remote work from home option, because life has just been changed for so many employees that now they're teaching from home, they're doing everything else from home, and they just really can't afford to leave the home in order to go to work anymore. As you realize, we've lost a lot of females in the workforce because of the dual responsibility or the triple responsibility of being a mom, a teacher, and an employee. So helping your employees to package all of that together for a better work-life balance is possibly an opportunity of a benefit that you can provide. Again, we've already mentioned some of the benefits if you are allowing remote work, such as, you may want to give a stipend for office setup. You may want to give an opportunity to give a monthly stipend for cell phone usage or internet. Whatever your position requires of that individual, that you're possibly going to be saving because you're not having that square footage space allocated anymore, you may can pass that along to a benefit to your employees. Also, a talent acquisition strategy needs to be reviewed, because as you're looking in the marketplace and you're very much needing to be competitive, it's important that you consider, what are your competitors doing in their talent acquisition strategy? What benefits are they offering? Where are they looking for their employees? And are you updated on that same type of messaging? If your employees are now at work, they're online a lot more, do you have a online presence to attract the right employees in order to have an understanding that this person already has some of the abilities, and the talent acquisition team is looking for those that are those diamonds in the roughs, and you can go deep and find them using that new talent acquisition strategy. Again, it is also an opportunity with remote work to retain employees. As I shared, employees are now, with summer time, your kids are out of school, but they're going to be going back to school in the fall. Some schools are not going back to in-person learning. And what works best for that employee to be retained within your workforce? A part of your retention strategy should also include looking at your knowledge capturing. And I don't know, Caroline may talk a little bit about this, but a risk that you have in your retention strategy is if the employee decides to leave your organization, how is it that you're going to capture the knowledge of that employee to ensure that that information is still retained within your organization and you can still grow in that particular skill set for your organization? All of these things you have to consider what the current state is and where you want to grow your organization. This becomes overall the culture. Where do you want to index as an organization? What does your brand look like? Do you want to be an employer-friendly organization that allows various ways of working, be it in office, at home, some type of a hybrid model? Very important. And most important to me is what type of technology will you use to support whichever model you decide to go with. And if it is the blended model, how do you not only ensure that your employees are using it from a Zoom for meeting and virtual opportunities, but also using it as a collaboration model? I believe Caroline will talk a little bit more about the technology and how that technology is often underutilized at this time. But given your full assessment of it, you can use technology to really drive the collaboration that is needed, be it in office or remote. But most importantly, whatever you decide to do as you assess your current state, your employees have to be trained and they have to be prepared. And so you have to include what is it your organization is able to invest in your employees on the front side and continuously to keep them up to date in the world in which you operate and ensure that they're able to serve your clients in the best way possible. Caroline, I'm going to kick it over to you to share a little bit more about how we use technology.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. So I'm Caroline Fritz, and I am happy to be here with all of you, and especially happy to work with the Clemson team. My background is I'm an industrial engineer, so I'm a very process-focused person, and I help my small to medium-sized business clients in helping document processes, in capturing and sharing knowledge, and really reimagining their work processes. So Will took us on a journey through the physical aspects of space. Karen talked a lot about the employee focused consideration. So I'm really going to talk about process and technology. So if you could click to the first slide. And there's going to be a lot of me asking Sally to click. I do apologize for that. I ended up adding some animation to bring in only the information you needed at the time that I'm going to talk about it. So you could go ahead and click to the first bullet. So I'm going to start by talking about a case study that was done on, this is actually from the Harvard Business Review, and it looked at what happened at IBM in the early 1980s when they launched their first email service within the company. They had to guess at the server size that would be required to manage email, and they estimated the usage by quantifying the company's inter-office mail capacity. So do y'all remember inter-office mail? The big envelope with all the names crossed off except the last one. So yeah, that's what email was supposed to take the place of. But back to IBM, do you think they overestimated or underestimated the server size? So that's right, they vastly underestimated the server size because they vastly underestimated how popular email would be. It not only took the place of inter-office mail, it took the place of standing up and walking down the hall to your coworker's office to ask a question. So it allowed knowledge workers to ping their coworkers in an ad hoc way on any issue, relieving the requester of information from having to plan ahead and putting the onus of managing this unplanned work on the receiver of the email. So do you think it made them more productive? Did it bring about greater employee satisfaction? The answer is no. And why is that? So as you can see, they implemented email without regard to workflow. So it was a free-for-all. We love to communicate, but unless it's implemented with a workflow, it it's only guaranteed to be a one-way communication. So the full title of that HBR article, by the way, is A Modest Proposal, Eliminate Email. So next slide. So I'm going to be brief. I've only got about 5 minutes here. And so for those of you that are kind of zoomed out, this is the abridged version. If your team functions well in person, it will do so well virtually. And next, if not, it won't. It's really that simple. So my friends that are nodding in agreement at the second bullet, this presentation is really for you. So the bottom line is, if you want your team to work more effectively, whether your team works together in person or virtually, you need to create a collaboration framework. So where do you start? So you start with identifying your team's workflow or process. Whether it's a accounts receivable or project management process, it's imperative to document how work flows through your team. And it's also imperative for each step that you identify or who does what. It needs to be very clear where does your role end and my role starts. Click, please. So along with that, and this has been touched on a little bit, it's important to understand what the deliverables are, including if it's a document, who does it need to be sent to next? How does communication need to work? Is it an IM or cringe, a phone call, to let someone know that your step in the process is complete? And lastly, of course, this is where technology comes in. If in your workflow, you determine that more than one person has required input for a work product, you might consider implementing a Google Docs or a SharePoint so that more than one person at a time can simultaneously work on a document and see exactly what changes their peer is making. And finally, manage to deliverables. So we're a little bit beyond, I'm still back at that slide. So whether you are a team leader or the manager of individual contributors that work solo, you must actively understand what the deliverables are that your team or employee is producing and manage expectations to deliverables rather than the old-fashioned way, which was managing to the time clock. So I'll go on a short tangent here. Around 15 years ago, I worked for Boeing while they were implementing a policy for knowledge workers to be required to work from home 1 day a week. From the Boeing's perspective, it was a cost savings measure, but for most employees, it was a quality of life measure. But there was, of course, resistance by some management. If they're at home, how will I know my employee is working? So let's be honest, just because they're at home, are you confident they're working? I would venture to say that the same employees that are wasting time in the office will likely waste time at home. Just because someone is on the clock doesn't mean that they are productive that entire time. And frankly, they shouldn't be expected to be. But the bottom line is honoring virtual work requires that you understand what your team does and that you manage to deliverables again and not the time clock. So next slide. So I'm going to talk briefly about collaboration tools. And it's interesting because, thinking back 20, 25 years, software developers have been working from home for a really long time, decades even. And many of them started creating their own tools for collaboration along the way. So I'm sure all of you realize there's absolutely no shortage of collaboration tools out there for your team to consider. And one of the upsides to the pandemic, as we all know, is that we were finally forced to start using them. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. At the beginning of the 2019-2020 school year, I was a member of my son's school improvement council, and we had to decide on whether we would allow folks that weren't close by the freedom of joining by video conference for our monthly meetings. And one of the SIC members recommended using this technology that most of us had never heard of called Zoom. Yeah. So who could have possibly predicted that by the end of the 2019-2020 school year, we were all Zoomed out? So looking at specific technology and which technology you should consider, it's completely dependent on the communication and collaboration required of your team. So again, thinking about that workflow, if it identifies a need for frequent check-ins and updates, a tool that allows for instant messaging and video conferencing may be required. If your workflow requires managing a more complex or integrated set of tasks, a project management tool might be required. And finally, if your workflow, thank you, Sally, if your she's starting to learn how to read my mind. If your workflow requires 2 or more people creating a deliverable together, there are great tools for allowing 2 people on 2 different sides of the world to look at a document together as if they were side by side. So the bottom line is your workflow and your budget should determine which tools are required. So I will add, look for simplicity. I'm going to guess that many of you have already invested in some form of collaboration technology. Go back to the workflow and really identify what that tool can do for you and how it could best support your process, particularly if you've already made that investment. So if you could click slide. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter whether your team is virtual or not, I guess is the bottom line. Teams that work better together are more inclusive and engaged. They're happier with their work. They're able to work more efficiently. They make better decisions. They produce the best work. And of course, the one thing that most companies truly care about is that teams that collaborate well give their companies the best opportunity to improve their bottom line. And I'm going to add, as a lean consultant and lean manufacturing expert, companies spend a lot of time trying to automate processes out on the factory floor. The biggest opportunity to remove waste and simplify and save money is looking at the processes that your knowledge workers are involved in. It's your front office processes. We have an incredible amount of waste in not operating efficiently because, again, as knowledge workers, we're not crazy about writing down our process. It's just something that we don't really do. We're too busy doing the work, right? So it's not something that we like to do, but it truly is a powerful tool to being able to identify what communication and deliverables are required and how your team can best work together, whether it's remote or together in the office.
This just really took the lid off of Pandora's Box. I mean, change is here, it's accelerating. And obviously we live in an environment that we have to learn how to predict. I enjoyed this so thoroughly.
It defining roles and responsibilities sounds easy, but in practice, there's a lot of gray. You have to get really granular. Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of getting into the details and saying who is going to send that communication out, who is going to write that part of the document. It's really getting into the details and defining specifically who does what. It's not fun, but it's necessary.
If I may say, so the previous organization I was at, they took a real deep dive on roles and responsibilities. And what was amazing was that there were disagreements in departments who was responsible for certain things. The deeper we got into it, the more disagreement we had. Now, basic day-to-day stuff, fine, but when you really, I'm not saying it's not important, it's extremely important, and it will show you that there is disagreement amongst team members as to, well, that's not my job, that's someone else's job. Well, guess what? Let's sort that out and figure out whose job it is. But that's pretty common. And I was amazed when we went through the process, how messy it got and how long it took us to do it, forever. So anyway.
Yeah, we tend to forget as well as humans. So documenting as you have those conversations and taking the time to pull the document out and say, let's see what we agreed on. a couple months ago when we talked through this, is something that it almost has to be done.
That we found as we do project work, like Microsoft Teams has a really unique, you can create a Teams channel based on a project, assign the project members to it, and then create a to-do list and actually assign the to-do to the individuals and give it a time, like a deadline. And it's been very successful. I am a lover of checklists. So anytime I can have a checklist and check that box, man, I go to that to-do list and I'm like, let me get this done. I want to be ahead of schedule. So, it gives you a lot of incentive to be the one person on that list that's got their stuff done. So as a,
And
a
a lot,
thought.
yeah. And Will, sorry to sort of jump in, but a lot of these tools also have a workflow. So you can assign, okay, I did my part, who gets it next?
That's
Who's
right.
the next person on the list? They could be set up to get an email reminder. So there, yeah, that's a great tool to manage tasks.
Unless
it
you
often-
have me in your workforce, where I'm a big picture person, and keeping track of all those details makes me want to cry. So there always has to be that element, the zoom out element, where I can look and say, okay, everything's happening correctly. I just need to understand my part.
And then that's why the training of all of the individuals who are going to be responsible for using the technology is so critical to any organization. And understanding that we have such a diverse group of individuals. Some people may have used Excel or Zoom in one format, but they haven't used it in the robustness that it allows. And so really having that dedicated training to bring individuals along with where the organization needs them to be is going to be critically important. Nan, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Nan.
Sorry, fascinating. And are there any more questions from anyone out in the gallery? I really appreciate everyone's attendance today. It gives us, we may have to reconvene another one in 6 months, because who knows what will have happened by then. But I'm going to leave the meeting, and anybody that wants to hang on for a minute, I'm sure Sally will shut it out. But if you need to talk, that's fine. But thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
And panelists, you were amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
all.
just have one example I have is just with virtual school. My child's school district did an amazing job with the kids and the teachers. They had teachers that were trained to do it all summer. So when my daughter started virtual school, she felt like part of the classroom. They had a lot of different activities where it wasn't just learning on, but they had breaks and things like that. And then they also had awards ceremonies, and we had a field day, like in your backyard, take pictures. And then so that's one of the things where, everybody was saying how, of course we want her to be in school next year, but one of the things that I did was let the school district know, if this was a model of how to do virtual school, because, she got to meet her classmates, got to talk with her classmates, talk with her teachers at any time they were available. And also got to do activities online that were where everybody felt a part of it. And I think that that's something where, so many people were like, well, virtual school just doesn't work. And I was like, you have not seen what what we've gone through. And it really does work if you do it in the way that, can increase that collaboration, that can bring people in and make you feel a part of it. And I think that's a huge thing. And so I just wanted to kind of let it just sort of brought home with me, what the teachers were able to do and the district was able to do with our kids and make them feel very much a part. And I really don't think they lost much in terms of learning. So just wanted to say, so thank you for bringing that home to me in the school sense too.
a head just appeared behind your shoulder. Oh, it disappeared
so
again. You
good.
got a
There
little
he
friend.
is.
You got a little friend.
My doggy. Yes,
He's a happy camper.
he is
Mhm.
a happy camper. He was in we had him boarded last week, so he's definitely enjoying life on the couch this week.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much. I am so appreciative of all, and let's see, we had a couple of messages. Yeah, I mean, thank you. And if anybody has any other questions, we're happy to entertain them now. If not, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting and let you guys go to lunch. Get something to
Thank
eat.
you so much.
All right,
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you
Have a great day,
all.
Really
everybody.
enjoy.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.